So let's talk about how we build Messenger.com. Before we get to all of that, why would we even build such a thing, or what is it? Well, it's a full-page React application on which you can receive and send Facebook messages. Basically, anything you can do, or mostly anything you can do with your Android or iOS phone, you can do on this web page as well. And we wanted to build it for many, many reasons. They were all covered in the initial press release. They are all still valid, but some things happened as a side effect. A lot of big companies block access to Facebook on their corporate networks because they want their employees to be productive. But they do not block Messenger.com, so people can still use Messenger.com to send Facebook messages. Also, because it's such a distraction-free environment, you are only able to send messages. A lot of companies have started including it in their productivity cheat sheets. Instead of using Facebook chat, you use Messenger.com. And that's something we didn't ask them to do, but apparently they like it. And how I got to work on it was basically a lot of luck. I joined Facebook around the time when people were gearing up to start this project. And they pitched the project to me. I liked it. I joined the Web Messenger team and haven't looked back since. So before I get to say a lot of things, let's talk about how we front-end at Facebook. Do you use front-end as a verb? Because you should. It's hard to say it anywhere else. But it all does boil down to modules. And everybody uses or should use modules. They make sense. They're the perfect building blocks. There's not a lot of things to say over there that are new. And this is all you need to make a module. JavaScript or CSS. In this case, we're making an example Messenger foo CSS module. The file name should also be named accordingly, but that's all you need, a doc block. And then you go about adding rules to your CSS file. And the quick view will notice that that's not valid syntax. We'll get to that later. But it does tell a story. It tells a story that this is the title rule from the Messenger foo module. And whenever you look at this rule, you know what it is. You cannot change rules from other modules. Why would you do that? This is how we enforce encapsulation. You cannot just do this. This would be bad. But sometimes you do need to change rules from other modules. That's how composition works. So we do allow changing public class names. These are classes that can be referenced from other modules than their parent ones. This is also bad, though. Why would you always want to change some other module's rules? You have to combine them with your own. This makes sense. You're on board with me for this. Yes? No? I'll take that as a yes. Anyway, this is all you need to actually make a module. All the other stuff is cruft for now. And this is how you use it. The doc block is almost the same. This provides a React module, and you're free to use it. We like flow. Please use flow type. A simple H1. This is how you actually use the class name we just used. We just created. You can do more fancy stuff. You can provide a hash, and the property names are the class names you want to be included, and the property values are booleans, and they signal whether or not to include this class in the class list. This is valued at runtime. The cheeky thing that stands out is the CX call that's always there. Whenever we want to use a class name, we have to wrap it in a CX call. That's just the way we do things. And because we know that that CX call is always there in our source code, we can analyze our source code for it. And we can look for instances of CX and know which files get referenced where. Right? Our static analysis tool at build step will look at something like this and say, hey, we need these two files. Mind grabbing them. And this is done completely under the hood. We never have to actually require or include CSS modules. If you use it, it will get required. Otherwise, it won't. This saves trouble, creates a whole different kind of other trouble, but it's, in the end, very useful. And we do a lot of cool things at our static analysis step. Right? We see which files you need. We require them for you up front, so when you use the class name, it's already there, and the browser knows what to do. And this sets us up to do very cool things that help with the two modes. I don't mean you read code more than you write code. I mean the human mode and the machine mode. When you're reading or writing code, you're in the human mode and you're interacting with the software that you're going to hopefully build. And then a machine will actually need to run that software. And there are very many differences between the two. For instance, I like to only have to type this, as I'm sure all of you don't want to write all the prefixes. So why not add them automatically at build step? And this is cool. You optimize for humans. But you can also optimize for machines at the same step, more or less. We know what browser makes a request. If Firefox requests a web page from Facebook, why would we send it WebKit rules? We don't. We strip them away. We only send them rules that it will understand. This might sound weird, but this saves a lot of bytes. And bytes are energy. And we save so much energy on this, it's like half of Hiroshima every single day. The lights are on over here because of that. That's pretty cool. The next thing we do is a pet peeve of mine. It doesn't matter if something is 0 pixels or 0% or 0 elephants from the right, it's still on the right, smack on it. So we don't need a unit there. We have things that just strip away the unit from 0. There's no need. We also munch things. Are you familiar with the term? Well, humans are silly. We need something to tell us a story. This rule clearly is the title rule from the Messenger Foo module. It's very easy for me to know that, but a machine doesn't need to know this. A machine needs a unique string. Let's give it one that is very short, right? So our CX call, in the end, when it's actually shipped, looks almost nothing like this, right? It gets evaluated, but the strings are a lot shorter. And these are, again, fewer bytes that you have to send down, more energy that you save. You can find a lot of shelter for stray cats with the energy that you save with this. Please do something like this. But this is all great into how you write software and how you ship it to the people, and then you're done. But we have another thing called Packager. And Packager is really cool. It deals with everything after that. We've released a new version of Facebook, it goes out to everybody, and then Packager begins its job. It looks at how things work. So in our example, in our Messenger Foo React module, we were requiring these 2 files. And Packager will look at how the files are required, especially in combination, and it builds not a dependency graph, we do that at build step, it builds an optimization graph. It sees that whenever we require this one JavaScript module, we always require these 2 files. These 2 files are always required together, and because we're still living in an HTTP1 world, we just concatenate them into their own package. Fewer round trips, fewer bytes, more energy. Very cool. And that's an example package name. It's never that long. It's something very short, usually. And it's automatically generated based on some algorithm I will never understand. But it's made by a machine, and machines are also silly. They make mistakes. Some time ago, this file was generated by Packager and shipped to people. Some of you already see the problem. I see some smiles. A lot of people started complaining that they cannot chat on Facebook, and we had no idea why. And it was because ad blockers thought that that file was an ad file. It was a bunch of files that were pretty needed for chat to work on Facebook. Right? Machines are silly, but that's why we still have a job. One thing I get asked a lot, so before I dive any deeper, I'll need to say this. We use neither. The reason is very, very simple. If you know how to build a web page using HTML, CSS, maybe JavaScript, you already have all the knowledge you need to be able to work at Facebook. And that pays off. People who just joined a company spend one day getting orientated, and then they can commit code already because they know everything they need to know. If we would use either or both or stylus, we'd raise the bar and we'd need them to get accustomed to the new thing first. Whereas this is just get up and go. But we do borrow some cool things from both less Sass and stylus because they do make sense. We have our own version of variables. We have constants. And if something gets used a lot, or in many cases, in many files, we just make one reference to it in a PHP file, and then we just add builds that replace all the things. And this is how you use it in CSS. Use a constant by calling the variable keyword, and well, now the rules, when, after how many uses do you create a constant instead of using the actual value? Nobody knows those. There are no rules, it's just whatever makes sense. And that works out. But enough about how we front-ended Facebook. I hope you get a rather, at least a rough idea of how things go and where things could go wrong. So let's get back to Messenger.com. And it all started about 5 years ago when chat on Facebook was being rewritten. Because the people who did that, people much smarter than me, they decided to go with a new kind of novel approach at the time and have some style-agnostic components that only knew how to get the information they needed and pass the information blindly to another module whose sole responsibility was to render it. And we call these special components and modules, we call them containers. And that was basically, this is how chat still works. It's container this, container this, container this. We call this shawarma-driven development. And how we applied this to Messenger.com, let's say we have a hypothetical list of recent conversations. We would just use the style agnostic component and say, hey, we want this. We will send in some props. So yes, order them in recent fashion and whatever. And this is the child class. This is your renderer. And then inside that component, at one point, after it fetches all the data it needs, it's like, here, you, renderer, have this. And then inside the renderer, you say, okay, cool. Now I have all the threads. I can list them individually. And for each one, it creates a new container. And the shawarma deep goes deeper and deeper. And this was great. This allowed us to, well, reuse most of the stuff we had there, and we just needed to style it differently, in essence. And because it's a new product, we didn't have to care about all the archaic browsers that Facebook.com supports. It supports all our browsers because we think everybody should be able to access Facebook.com. But this, Messenger.com, was a new product, one, and two, by definition, a niche product. So we could say, nah, we want the cool stuff. Like, we wanted to use Flexbox. We were all, aching to use CSS Grid for layout. But, we wanted something like this. And with a CSS-only solution, it didn't work out too well. Because a CSS-only solution is just that. You get to say, I only use CSS. It has no benefit to anyone. Your users won't care. They want to use a cool thing and have a nice experience. You're stuck with maintaining more CSS than you have to. And it's hard to get it to work a lot of the times. So instead of using Flexbox and CSS Grid, we fell back to a very old layout JavaScript-based component, but an old battle-tested. People had worked out the bugs, the kinks. It works with every browser the way you expected it. And we shipped with that. Later, when we had more time, we went back and saw, well, why wasn't it working? There were problems. What were they? To be able to bring Flexbox back. Well, Flexbox has evolved as a standard over the years, and we had some static transform rules that were not only out of sync, but conflicting with each other. So Chrome would get the new Flexbox style rules, but Safari, regardless of version, would get the old WebKit box things, which do not work well. And Microsoft had its own problems. Flex Grow is 110 pixels, is what Microsoft needs for it to understand things. But remember our rule that strips away the unit from 0? And if you have just 0 there, i.e. just says, I don't know what this rule means, I'll just skip it. Once we fixed all of that, it was great. And we had a new set of problems then. Because you're never done. Can you see what's wrong here? How about now? So in right to left, a mode in which many people write, as you're typing space and comma, or comma and space rather, as you do to add a comma, they would get flipped because you have mixed right to left and left to right content on the page, and the browser gets confused, and we did not know why. We thought we weren't including some very old JavaScript modules that look at what you're typing, and that made no sense. The actual problem was, well, we were using just one font definition, as you do in any web app. These are, I'm sorry. This is our font family, this is our web stack, just go. And we were using Helvetica Neue, which apparently has this problem. If you have mixed content on the page and you're typing in right to left and you say comma space, it will flip them for you because it's helpful. So we do have one font definition, except we fall back to the old Facebook font in right to left, which still looks great and doesn't have this nuisance. And this week we just found out another interesting thing. You know Sego UI, the Microsoft font, the default font from Microsoft? Well, in Windows 10, it got split into Sego UI and Sego UI Historical. And Sego UI Historical has a bunch of glyphs that you don't normally use, except it also has Georgian in there, which is a language in which people type, millions of people type every day. In Windows 10 on IE, the transition between the two fonts is seamless, but in Chrome it's not, and Chrome just doesn't know how to display those glyphs, the Georgian glyphs. And it's only a problem in Chrome, and you can't say, no, use the historical font, because that's not actually a font. And we're still trying to fix it. But fonts will do you in, especially because you have no control over the actual font. You only have control over whether you use it or not. But it's hard not to use Sego UI on Windows, isn't it? That's enough about fonts. Let's talk about pixels and how they suck. Because as a JavaScript component, you want pixels. It's a lot easier to reason about with pixels or units of some sort than it is to do with percentages. But we're a full-page application, and we need to display content. And content can be 1 photo, 2, 3, you can keep going. And we need to be able to display them nicely. And doing this in a pixel-based approach would mean, well, we have to measure every single time, and we have to slice things and calculate. And if you do this when you have 100 messages on either side of the conversation, your page won't work anymore. But what we needed to do was be responsive, and we know how to be responsive. It's 2016. We have that down now. But you can only get so much out of just breakpoints. We had 4. 4 sounds like a lot. It is a lot. And we actually do very simple things at each breakpoint. One of the biggest and in-your-face changes we do make is we show or hide the right-hand column based on your screen width. If you don't have enough space to display, we automatically hide it. You can still bring it back if you click the button, but we try to be helpful. When we launched, we got featured on Good Products, as you do, and somebody actually reverse engineered, I guess I could call it. Somebody spent 10 minutes doing this and taking notes about viewport size, and then he actually fed us back our specification on how to do this. And he said he was blown away by how much attention we had put into this. We hadn't, but it did work out in the end. It works well enough so that people notice, and it is helpful. But this is a very in-your-face kind of change. You can also be responsive on a much smaller scale. Titles in Messenger are centered. That's an absolute. That's how it is on your web app. On our web app, on your phone app, everywhere in Messenger, titles are centered. But sometimes conversation names can be very long, especially if they're unnamed. Then you have people with long names. That stuff grows. And if you narrow down your browser window, you still need to display something. Have you ever tried truncating centered text? It is not fun. No matter what you do with a CSS-only solution, even if you would get element query, it's not going to be okay. But you do have JavaScript, and with JavaScript you can just say, you know what, now is when we should truncate. We don't have enough room because of the icon. Just apply a different class, float everything to the left, no longer center it, and apply a truncation. But I mentioned we do this because all the titles in Messenger are centered. And that's a thing that belongs to a style guide. So for Facebook.com, we have this. Do you know what this is? Somebody say the name. Wow. Yes, this is a FIG. It stands for the Facebook Interface Guide. And we have something else. Can you guess what it is? The MIG, the Messenger Interface Guide, yes. And building style guides is not something new. It's not revolutionary. But they should not be built by designers. Why? Why should they have all the fun? They're not the only ones who'll be using the product. Having the whole team involved in creating a style guide is a lot more useful, and you get it done a lot quicker as well. But in any case, on Facebook.com, we'd have an XUI button, and on Messenger.com, because we need things to look differently, we'd have our own component, a Messenger button. This is what they look like side by side. Ours looks more like a link, which is pretty bad. But that's the style guide. The right one is, or sorry, the left one is the Facebook one. But they're in fact almost the same component. Underlying both of these two style components is a style agnostic component that knows how to be accessible, knows how to handle clicks well, and knows how to do all the cool things that would make it a useful button. Because we are able to reuse style agnostic components, we get all the accessibility stuff that Facebook.com has built for free. And I do want to take a moment to emphasize accessibility. It doesn't matter how nice something looks if you can't see it. Please think more about accessibility when building your web apps. And on that note, screw this element. It's just awful. Remember this example where you have an indefinite number of images that you need to display based on how many they are and how wide the viewport is without actually measuring it? If you try to do this with images, you're not going to have fun. The images will be all skewed, or you have to do some heavy computation to see how much you should crop, and that's not fun. Also, people resize their browsers all the time, and then you need to reapply all those computations. And that's not enough, though, because we also have this. If you send a link, we show you a preview of what that link is. And many links do include images. And if they do, we show them like this, if it's big enough. If it's not big enough, the exact same component says, no, render it inline, render it like an icon. Exact same component. And of course, you already know, we do this with background size. It's my new favorite thing. And you can set up the CSS so that everything you need to do in JavaScript is, hey, do this. All you need is the actual URL to the image, and your CSS can handle everything else. And that empowered us to build very cool, very stupid components that you can use to build cool things. Like that shirt I ordered that I'm probably never going to wear because this is the Bay Area. It can have a component that tells me it's on its way, it's going to get delivered to the wrong address apparently. And this was built by another team, not by us, because we were more or less done having built the building blocks. A different team came around and built payments, and it was so easy for them to get them to just drop in Messenger.com only by using our components. And that's actually a very cool thing. All the teams that have worked with us have told us it's such a pleasure to build because everything just works out of the box, because everything is very stupid. It doesn't make assumptions, it doesn't do anything, it just does what you tell it to do. That's not the coolest part. Yes, it's nice to be helpful for other people, it's nice to have built this, but what this is, what Messenger.com is the first secondary domain. Now, the first time I gave this presentation, I said this very emphatically, and I was wrong, because we have Instagram and internet.org, which are also secondary domains of Facebook. But Messenger.com is indeed the first web application that lives on a secondary domain. So please use Messenger.com, and let me know what you think. I'm here all day.